Having been rewatching House of the Dragon recently, I was struck by just how different it is compared to other TV shows released around the same time, largely in the attitudes of the creatives involved. And I think that the main difference is that George kept some level of creative control. Other fantasy TV shows around this time were largely pilfered from the graves and hands of dead or disinterested authors. Jordan, Tolkien, and Sapkowski were either dead and thus unable to protect their work, or in the case of Sapkowski, couldn't be bothered to give enough of a crap about his work and was more than happy to let Netflix's The Witcher turn it into the shit show we all love to hate today. But in the case of House of the Dragon, George's hand can be seen quite clearly in the story. In plot points that a lesser show would splay across the screen in bold flashing neon, they are instead in House of the Dragon hinted at. The show is gritty, with all the gratuitous violence, plotting, and TNA that George R. R. Martin is known for, and the fact that the show is adapted from George's crappy ripoff of the Silmarillion, and thus the source material is vague enough to allow a certain amount of creative freedom to the showrunners and the writers, it probably helps to keep things harmonious on set, thus perhaps forestalling the drama that killed Game of Thrones. There are a few girl boss moments, and a moment that stinks of Game of Thrones Season 8 in all of its stupidity, but overall the plot is fairly tight and set on decent foundation for future seasons. I think that if this show stays the course while pitching the more retarded elements out the window, it may well be some of the best fantasy television we are likely to get for a while. Many of the old complaints from Game of Thrones remain as the show ditches or ignores most of the magical elements of the world, and of course there's the fact that many of the characters don't look as described in the books. Now, I don't mind this as much because the actors play their parts very well, and the race swapping of the Valyrians is used to make a certain plot point later on all the more blatant, and it's not just, hey, we need more black people, which I think was very clever of George and the screenwriters. Overall, I like House of the Dragon. It does get better after you view it a second time. You notice things that you didn't notice the first time you watch it. Game of Thrones isn't my favorite fantasy book series by a lot. Hell, it's not even my favorite dark fantasy book series, but any port in a storm, and as long as it keeps or exceeds its current quality, I think that it is the best we are likely to get for a long time. But tell me what you think down below, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Pete, the Radical Nerd, signing off.